The champagne flutes were polished to a diamond shine, and the orchestra played a waltz that sounded like a lullaby for the wealthy, masking the rot beneath the floorboards. Lucas stood by the velvet curtain, watching his wife, Elena, laugh with a warmth she hadn't shown him in 3 years. A perfect performance for everyone but the man she had vowed to love. It was the night of the foundation gala, the pinnacle of her social calendar, and the night Lucas decided he was done being the silent prop in her meticulously curated tragedy. He adjusted his cufflinks, feeling the cold weight of the evidence in his pocket, knowing that in less than an hour, the applause would turn into a silence so deafening it would shatter their world. If you find yourself drawn to the jagged edges of broken vows and the quiet storms behind closed doors, stay with me as we peel back the layers of this beautiful lie. The silence in the penthouse was not empty. It was heavy, pressurized, like the air inside a submarine dive that had gone too deep. Lucas Vane stood before the floor-to-ceiling mirror in the master dressing room, his fingers fumbling with the silk knot of his tie. At 42, he still had the jawline that had once made Elena stop in the middle of a crowded lecture hall to stare at him. But the eyes looking back at him now were dull, washed out by 3 years of sleeping in the guest bedroom. "Lucas, are you deaf?" The voice sliced through the hum of the HVAC system. Elena stood at the threshold of the walk-in closet. She was a vision in emerald satin, the fabric clinging to a body that she spent hours at the gym perfecting, a body he hadn't touched since the previous winter. "I'm hurrying," Lucas said, his voice raspy. He hadn't spoken since morning. "You're not hurrying. You're stalling. It's a passive-aggressive trait you've developed recently, and frankly, it's exhausting." Elena walked past him, the scent of Santal 33 trailing behind her, a sharp, woody smell that used to intoxicate him, but now just smelled like anxiety and credit card bills. She turned her back to him, lifting her hair. "Zip me, and be careful with the lace." Lucas stepped forward. His hands hovered for a second, before touching the cold metal of the zipper. As his knuckles brushed the skin of her back, he felt her flinch. It was microscopic, a tiny tightening of the trapezius muscle. But to him, it felt like a slap. She recoiled from his touch as if he were unclean. "You're cold," he murmured, sliding the zipper up. "And you're slow," she countered, stepping away instantly, creating the safe distance she required. She turned to the mirror, adjusting her diamond earrings, her eyes scanning her reflection for flaws, but refusing to meet his gaze in the glass. "Don't drink tonight, Lucas. The board members from the trust will be there. I need you to look like you're handling the merger well, not like you're drowning in self-pity." "I'm not drinking, Elena. I haven't had a drink in months." "Well, you look like you have," she said, finally meeting his eyes in the mirror, her expression flat, clinical. "You look tired. Fix your face before we get to the car. The photographers are going to be aggressive." Lucas watched her. He looked for a trace of the woman who used to make coffee for him at 2 a.m. while he finished blueprints. He looked for the partner who had promised to build a life with him. All he saw was a brand manager ensuring her product, their marriage, was shelf-ready for the evening's consumption. "Do you even want me there?" Lucas asked. The question hung in the air, fragile. Elena paused, a tube of lipstick halfway to her mouth. She sighed, a sound of profound irritation. "Do we have to do this now? It's the pre-gala dinner, Lucas. It's not about want. It's about optics. You know the narrative. The architect and the philanthropist. Without you standing there looking stoic and supportive, I look like a divorced social climber. Just play the part. Please, play the part. He had been playing the part for 1,000 days. The dutiful husband, the wallet, the background noise. Right, Lucas said, straightening his jacket. He felt a strange sensation in his chest. Not the usual ache of rejection, but something harder, like concrete setting. Optics. Elena's phone buzzed on the vanity. The screen lit up. Lucas glanced down. The preview message was short. Waiting for you. Told him I'm at the gym. It wasn't a name Lucas recognized, just an initial M. Elena snatched the phone with a speed that betrayed her composure. She shoved it into her clutch, her heartbeat visible in the pulse of her neck. For a second, their eyes locked. She didn't look guilty. She looked annoyed that he was present to witness the interruption. "Let's go," she said, her voice brittle. "The driver has been waiting for 10 minutes. She swept out of the room, not waiting for him. Lucas stood alone in the vast, expensive closet. He looked at the empty space where she had stood, then at his own reflection. He reached into his pocket and touched the USB drive he had retrieved from the safe earlier that afternoon. He fixed his face just as she had asked. He smiled. It was a terrible, hollow thing, but it would do for the cameras. "After you, my love," he whispered to the empty room and turned off the lights. The ride back from the pre-gala dinner had been a study in practiced silence. Elena spent the 20-minute drive scrolling through her feed, the blue light of the screen illuminating a face that was perfect, composed, and utterly closed off to the man sitting 2 feet away. When they entered the penthouse, the silence followed them in, settling over the marble floors like a layer of dust. "I need a shower," Elena announced, dropping her clutch on the hallway console. She didn't look at him. "Don't wait up. You have an early meeting with the contractors, don't you?" "Yes," Lucas said. "The expansion project." "Right, the expansion." She said the word as if it were a synonym for irrelevant. "Good night, Lucas." She disappeared into the master suite. Moments later, the sound of running water hissed through the walls. Lucas remained in the living room, loosening his tie, feeling the familiar exhaustion that had nothing to do with lack of sleep. He walked into the kitchen to pour a glass of water, his reflection in the dark window acting as a ghost companion. He intended to sleep in the guest room as usual, but he realized he had left his phone charger on the nightstand in the master bedroom. He hesitated. The water was still running. He could slip in and out. Lucas pushed the door open quietly. The room was dim, lit only by the spill of light from the bathroom door left slightly ajar. The steam carried the scent of her expensive apricot scrub. On the duvet, where she had carelessly tossed her day clothes, lay her iPad Pro. It buzzed. Lucas froze. He knew the passcode. It was the date they had closed on this apartment. A date she likely didn't remember, but never bothered to change because she assumed he was too gentlemanly to snoop. Another buzz. The screen lit up. A notification from iMessage. M. Did the furniture behave tonight? Lucas felt the blood drain from his face, pooling somewhere in his feet. The furniture. His hand moved before his conscience could stop it. He tapped the code. The device unlocked, syncing instantly with her phone. The message thread with M was at the top, a long, continuous stream of blue bubbles. But it wasn't the texts that caught his eye. It was the audio files. Dozens of voice notes sent back and forth. He lowered the volume to the barest minimum and pressed play on the most recent one, sent from the bathroom during the dinner break earlier that evening. Elena's voice, tinny and whispered, floated up from the speaker. God, he's exhausting. He just stands there with that wounded puppy look. I swear, Mark, it's like living with a ghost that pays the bills. I just need to get through the gala. Once the donor checks clear for the new wing, I'll have the leverage to file without the board panicking. Just wait for me. I'm wearing the dress you liked. Lucas stared at the waveform on the screen as the audio ended. A ghost that pays the bills. He didn't cry. He didn't throw the tablet against the wall. Instead, a strange, icy calm washed over him. It was the clarity of a diagnosis. For years, he had convinced himself that she was just stressed, that they were going through a rough patch, that he could fix it if he just tried harder, earned more, complained less. But you cannot fix contempt. He scrolled up. There were months of this. Photos of them at events with captions like "prop duty" sent to Mark. Jokes about his clothes, his job, his shyness. She wasn't just falling out of love. She was performing a comedy routine for her lover, using Lucas as the punchline. The water in the bathroom stopped. Lucas's heart hammered against his ribs. He quickly swiped out of the app, locked the iPad, and placed it back exactly where it had been on the duvet, aligning the edge with the pattern of the fabric. He grabbed his charger and stepped back toward the door just as the bathroom handle turned. Elena stepped out, wrapped in a plush white towel, steam billowing around her. She stopped when she saw him, her eyes narrowing instantly. "What are you doing in here?" she snapped, clutching the towel tighter. "Charger," Lucas said, lifting the cord. His voice was steady, too steady. "Left it on the nightstand." Elena studied him for a second, her gaze flicking to the iPad on the bed and then back to his face. Oh, she was looking for guilt. She was looking for a fight. Lucas gave her nothing. He channeled every ounce of his professional discipline, the poker face he used during hostile contract negotiations. "Get out," she said, dismissing him. "Good night, Elena," Lucas replied. He walked out of the room and closed the door softly. He stood in the hallway, the charger gripped tight in his hand. The grief was gone, evaporated by the heat of the humiliation he had just witnessed. In its place was a cold, architectural precision. She wanted him to be a prop? Fine. He would be the best prop she had ever seen. He would support the structure perfectly, right until the moment he decided to pull the load-bearing beam. He walked to his study, sat down at his computer, and opened a new folder. He named it The Gala. Then he began to type. The change in the penthouse was subtle, like a shift in barometric pressure before a storm, but only one person felt it. For Elena, the week leading up to the Vain Hope Gala was unexpectedly smooth. The friction she had become accustomed to, Lucas's sullen silences, his petty attempts to start conversations about their marriage, his lingering stares, had evaporated. In his place was a man who functioned with the efficiency of a high-end appliance. "I need you to pick up the auction items from the gallery on Thursday," Elena said over breakfast on Tuesday morning. She didn't look up from her kale smoothie. "My assistant is swamped with the seating charts." Usually, Lucas would have argued. He would have mentioned his own workload, the deadlines at the firm, or the fact that he was a senior partner, not an errand boy. "Consider it done," Lucas said, slicing his toast. "I can swing by around 2. Do you need me to verify the insurance papers for the jewelry too?" Elena paused, her spoon freezing halfway to her mouth. She looked at him, searching for sarcasm. His face was a blank canvas of helpfulness. "Yes," she said slowly. "That would be helpful." I'll handle it, he said. He took a sip of black coffee, his eyes calm. I want the night to go perfectly for you. It's a big milestone. She relaxed, a smug satisfaction settling in her eyes. To her, this wasn't a truce. It was a victory. She believed she had finally broken him in, that he had accepted his role as the supporting character in her biopic. Later that day, while Lucas sat in his office, he saw a notification pop up on the shared cloud account, a text from Elena to Mark. He's finally being useful. I think he realizes who holds the purse strings. Gala prep is a breeze. Lucas read the message and felt nothing. No anger, no sting. He simply dragged the screenshot into the folder named The Gala. His office at the architecture firm became his war room. To his secretary and partners, it looked like he was pulling late nights for the Hudson Project. In reality, Lucas was dismantling his life. He spent hours on the phone with his forensic accountant, moving liquid assets into accounts that Elena's lawyers couldn't touch without a subpoena. He quietly removed his name from the joint renewal of the lease on their summer house in the Hamptons. But his masterpiece was the presentation. As the architect of the Vane Foundation's new wing, it was Lucas's job to prepare the visual slideshow for the gala, a loop of architectural renderings, charity impact photos, and accolades for Elena. It was the backdrop against which the evening would unfold. He sat in the dark of his office, the glow of the dual monitors illuminating his face. On the left screen was the official program: Elena cutting ribbons, Elena holding orphans, Elena smiling at donors. On the right screen was the timeline he had constructed. It was a meticulous overlay. He matched the dates of her business trips with the credit card receipts from hotels in Napa and resort fees in Cabo, trips he hadn't been invited to. He took the time-stamped photos she had sent him of late nights at the office and placed them next to the metadata from the synced iPad showing her location at Mark's condo on the north side. He wasn't manufacturing anything. He was simply correcting the perspective. He worked on the transitions with obsessive care. The slide for unwavering dedication would hold for 10 seconds, showing her official headshot, before glitching, just a flicker at first, into a screenshot of a text message where she mocked the very orphans she was raising money for. Then, it would cut to the timeline of her affair. It had to be precise. It had to look like a technical error at first, something that would confuse the audience before the horror set in. Mr. Vane? Lucas minimized the window instantly as his assistant Sarah poked her head in. It's late. You're still here? Just finishing the presentation, Sarah, Lucas said, offering a tired, gentle smile. It has to be perfect. Elena has worked so hard. Sarah sighed, a look of pity crossing her face. Everyone knew. The staff, the friends, the circle. They all knew how Elena treated him. You're a good man, Mr. Vane. She's lucky to have you. Thank you, Sarah, he said softly. I think everyone will see exactly what kind of team we are on Saturday. When she left, Lucas brought the window back up. He watched the transition one more time. It was brutal. It was undeniable. It was ready. He saved the file to 3 separate drives. He put one in his pocket, one in his briefcase, and locked the third in his office safe. He checked his watch. It was 9:00 p.m. Elena would be at her yoga class, code for Mark's apartment. Lucas stood up, put on his coat, and walked out into the cool Chicago night. He wasn't going home to wait for her. He walked to a small diner 2 blocks away, ordered a burger, and ate alone. For the first time in 3 years, the food tasted like freedom. The black stretch limousine idled at the curb of their building, like a hearse waiting for a body. It was raining lightly, a cold Chicago drizzle that smeared the city lights against the tinted windows. Inside the vehicle, the air was chilled to a precise 68 degrees, scented with expensive leather and the metallic tang of hairspray. Lucas sat on the rear bench, his hands resting loosely on his knees. He was wearing a custom tuxedo, the fabric midnight blue, tailored to perfection. It felt less like formal wear and more like armor. Beside him, Elena was a flurry of kinetic energy, checking her reflection in a lighted compact mirror for the 10th time since they had merged onto Lakeshore Drive. "You're slouching," she said, snapping the compact shut. She didn't look at him, but her voice whipped across the space between them. "Sit up, Lucas. The photographers capture everything. If you look defeated, the donors get nervous. Nervous money doesn't write checks." Lucas straightened his spine, adjusting his posture with the obedience of a well-trained dog. "Better?" "Marginally," she muttered, smoothing the skirt of her gown. It was a silver masterpiece that cost more than most people's cars, designed to make her look ethereal, angelic. The irony was not lost on him. "And for God's sake, when we get to the red carpet, hold my hand. Not like you're holding a dead fish. Grip it. Look like you adore me." "I know the drill, Elena," Lucas said quietly. "Do you?" She turned to him then, her eyes hard and glittering. "Because lately, you've been drifting. You're present physically, but your mind is somewhere else. I can't have that tonight. Mark, Mr. Henderson is bringing the tech investors. This merger is critical for the foundation's expansion. If I look like I can't manage my own husband, how does that look for my ability to manage a $10 million fund?" Lucas looked at her. He saw the anxiety vibrating beneath her skin. He saw the terror of imperfection that drove her. In the past, this was the moment he would have reached out, touched her cheek, and reassured her that she was brilliant, that they were a team. He would have absorbed her stress so she could shine. Tonight, he just looked at his watch. 7:15 p.m. 45 minutes until his speech. "You look beautiful, Elena," he said. The lie tasted like ash. "You have nothing to worry about. The night will be unforgettable." She paused, seemingly mollified by the compliment, though she didn't return it. She simply nodded, accepting it as her due. "Just don't drink too much," she added, a reflex criticism. "And when you introduce me, keep it brief. Stick to the script I emailed you. Don't try to be funny. You're not funny." "I'm sticking to the script," Lucas said. "Just not your script." The limo slowed as they approached the venue. Even through the soundproofing, the dull roar of the crowd and the frenetic clicking of camera shutters bled in. Flashes of white light popped against the wet windows, lightning in a bottle. "Here we go," Elena whispered to herself. She took a deep breath, her face transforming in an instant. The scowl vanished. The tension in her jaw dissolved. A radiant, benevolent smile took its place. It was a terrifying magic trick. She looked at Lucas one last time, her eyes warning him. "Smile, Lucas. It's showtime." The driver opened the door. The noise of the city rushed in. Shouts of photographers, the honking of traffic, the applause of onlookers. Elena stepped out first, waving gracefully, the silver dress catching every photon of light. Lucas followed. He stepped onto the damp red carpet, the cold air hitting his face. He felt the weight of the USB drive in his inner jacket pocket, pressing against his ribs. He reached out and took Elena's hand. Her grip was tight, possessive, a claim of ownership. "Over here! Elena, Lucas, just one look. Mr. Vane, tell us about the new wing." Lucas smiled. He smiled at the cameras, he smiled at the screaming journalists, and he smiled at his wife, who was currently squeezing his hand hard enough to bruise. He walked beside her into the cavernous, golden-lit hall of the gala, playing the part of the devoted husband one last time. As they passed through the heavy double doors, leaving the cold street behind, Lucas felt a strange sense of peace settle over him. It was the calm of a man who had already jumped off the cliff and was simply waiting for gravity to take over. The masquerade was about to end. The ballroom of the Drake Hotel was a sea of black ties and designer silk, illuminated by chandeliers that dripped crystal like frozen tears. The air hummed with the polite, low-frequency murmur of 200 people who controlled a significant portion of the city's GDP. At the center table, Elena held court, her laugh tinkling above the din as she charmed a senator's wife. She hadn't looked at Lucas since they sat down. Lucas sat silently, watching the condensation bead on his glass of sparkling water. He felt detached, as if he were watching the scene from a catwalk high above. When the master of ceremonies approached the microphone, the room quieted with practiced obedience. "And now," the MC announced, his voice smooth as velvet, "to introduce our founder and the heart of this foundation, please welcome the man who designed the very walls of the new wing, her husband and partner, Lucas Vane." Polite applause rippled through the room. Elena turned to him then, her eyes flashing a final warning. "Stick to the script." She squeezed his hand, a performance for the table, and whispered, "Don't mumble." Lucas stood up. He buttoned his jacket and walked to the stage. The spotlight blinded him for a moment, turning the audience into a faceless ocean of darkness. He placed his hands on the podium. In front of him, the teleprompter displayed the speech Elena had written. "Good evening. When I first met Elena, I knew she was a force of nature." Lucas looked at the scrolling text. Then he looked down at the crowd, finding Elena's table in the front row. He saw Mark Henderson sitting 2 seats away from her, looking bored, swirling his scotch. Lucas reached out and adjusted the microphone. He didn't look back at the teleprompter. "Good evening," Lucas said. His voice was steady, resonating clearly through the high-end sound system. "There is a script here in front of me. It speaks about vision, about charity, about the abstract idea of hope." He paused. The room was dead silent. Elena shifted in her seat, her smile tightening by a fraction. "But tonight, I don't want to talk about abstractions. I want to talk about specifics. I want to talk about sacrifice. Because you don't build a legacy like the Vane Foundation without giving up something precious. And no one knows what my wife has given up better than I do." The audience nodded respectfully. It sounded like the beginning of a moving tribute. "I remember our 10th anniversary last month," Lucas continued, his tone conversational, almost intimate. "October 14th. Most people would have taken the night off. We had a reservation at Elena. But at 4:00 p.m., Elena called me. She said there was a crisis with the new tech partnership, that she had to fly to San Francisco immediately to secure the funding for the children's wing." Elena went still. Her hand, which had been resting on the tablecloth, curled into a fist. She hadn't gone to San Francisco. She had stayed in the city, at the Four Seasons, with Mark. "She didn't come home for 2 days," Lucas said, looking directly at her. She missed our anniversary dinner to be in a meeting, or so she told me, to ensure this foundation had a future. That is dedication. To put the needs of others above the vows you made to your husband. A few people murmured in admiration. What a saint, they thought. But at table 1, the color was draining from Elena's face. Mark Henderson put his glass down, his eyes narrowing. And it wasn't just then. Lucas went on, his voice gathering strength. Last Christmas. The flood in the archive room. Elena spent Christmas Eve and Christmas Day sorting files at the office. I remember sitting alone by the tree, thinking about how hard she was working. It takes a special kind of person to leave their family on Christmas to be where they need to be. The air in the room shifted. The praise was becoming too specific, too heavy on the image of Lucas sitting alone. The guests shifted uncomfortably, sensing a sorrow beneath the words, though they couldn't yet name the malice. She calls me her rock, Lucas said, a small, sad smile touching his lips. But even rocks erode over time, don't they? Tonight, I want to show you exactly what that work looks like. I want you to see the reality behind the glamour. Because the truth is the only thing that matters anymore. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small remote, and pointed it at the massive projection screen behind him. Elena, he said softly, this is for you. He pressed the button. Elena started to stand up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor, but it was too late. The giant screen flickered to life. The screen behind Lucas flared to life, a blinding rectangle of white light that bathed the first few rows of tables in an artificial glow. At first, it was exactly what the audience expected. The Vane Foundation logo faded in, followed by a high-resolution image of Elena standing in a hard hat, pointing at blueprints, looking determined and visionary. Dedication, the text on the screen read. A polite ripple of applause started, but it died almost instantly. The image didn't fade to the next slide. It stuttered. The screen flickered with a static distortion, a digital tear that looked like a system error. Then, the slide of Elena in the hard hat shrank to the corner, and a new window popped up over it. It was a timeline graphic, sleek and professional, the kind used in corporate audits. The header read, October 14th, the San Francisco Summit. As I mentioned, Lucas said, his voice cutting through the sudden confused murmur, Elena was in San Francisco securing our future. On the screen, a document appeared. It was a geotagged Uber receipt. Pickup, the Vane penthouse. Drop-off, the residences at North Park, Unit 4202. The time was 4:45 p.m. Next to it, a text message bubble appeared, enlarged for clarity. Sender, Elena. Recipient, Mark. Message, he bought the San Francisco story. I'm on my way. Have the wine open. The room went dead silent. It was a silence so profound you could hear the hum of the projector cooling fans. Mark Henderson, sitting 2 seats away from Elena, went rigid. He didn't look at her. He stared straight ahead, his face draining of color as he realized the Unit 4202 address was being broadcast to 200 of Chicago's elite. Elena stood up. Her legs were shaking. She looked at the tech booth at the back of the room, making a slashing motion across her throat. "Cut it," she mouthed, her voice trapped in her throat. "Cut it off!" But the presentation was hard-coded into the system, or perhaps the technician was too stunned to react. The screen shifted again. December 25th, the archive flood crisis. A photo appeared. It was a selfie. Elena was in a bathrobe, holding a glass of champagne. In the background, out of focus but unmistakable, was a man's torso in a gray cashmere sweater. The same gray sweater Mark Henderson had worn to the club Christmas party the week prior. The metadata timestamp was displayed in bold red font. Deck 25, 11:30 p.m. Beside it, Lucas had placed a photo from his own phone camera. A picture of their living room, dark and empty, with a single plate of cold food on the table. The juxtaposition was brutal. It wasn't just proof of an affair. It was proof of cruelty. "A technical glitch, I assume," Lucas said calmly, turning slightly to look at the screen as if he were seeing it for the first time. He didn't sound surprised. He sounded like a curator explaining a piece of modern art. "Technology has a way of revealing the metadata of our lives, doesn't it?" "Lucas, stop this." Elena's voice finally cracked through the air, shrill and panicked. She was gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. "It's a virus. Someone hack—" The screen flickered one last time. The photos vanished. A waveform audio file appeared. It was the recording from the bathroom. The volume in the ballroom was turned up to maximum. "It's like living with a ghost that pays the bills. Just useful furniture. Once the foundation is fully endowed, I'll have the leverage to file." Elena's voice boomed through the hall, magnified, distorted slightly by the speakers, but undeniably her. The contempt in her tone was visceral. Every donor in the room heard her call her husband furniture. Every board member heard her plot to use their money as leverage for a divorce. The audio ended. The screen went black, leaving only the stark white text. End of presentation. Lucas stood at the podium in the darkness. He looked down at his wife. She wasn't looking at him anymore. She was looking around the room, seeing the expressions of her friends, her colleagues, her investors. She saw shock. She saw disgust. And worst of all, she saw pity. Mark Henderson quietly pushed his chair back, stood up, and began to walk briskly toward the exit, head down, leaving Elena alone at the center of the wreckage. Lucas didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply looked at the space where Mark had been sitting, then back to Elena. "I hope the new wing is everything you sacrificed for," Lucas said into the microphone. The feedback from the speakers whined softly, a high-pitched needle threading through the stunned silence of the grand ballroom. The screen behind Lucas had finally gone dark, but the afterimage of the time-stamped texts seemed to hang in the air like smoke. Lucas looked at the microphone in his hand. It felt heavy, a weapon he had discharged and no longer needed. He didn't slam it down. He didn't throw it. He simply leaned forward and placed it gently on the wooden lectern. Thud. The sound was magnified by the system, a final period at the end of a sentence that had taken 3 years to write. He stepped back from the podium. The spotlight was still on him, blinding and hot. But as he descended the 3 short steps to the ballroom floor, he moved into the shadows. The crowd, the elite of Chicago, senators, heirs, CEOs, parted for him. It wasn't a gesture of respect. It was the instinctive recoil people have when a building collapses. They didn't want to be hit by the debris. He walked down the center aisle. To his left, he heard a glass shatter. Someone at table 4 had knocked over a wine glass in their haste to whisper to a neighbor. To his right, he saw faces he knew, people who had laughed at Elena's jokes about him, people who had ignored him at parties. They studied their shoes or stared resolutely at the floral centerpieces. He approached table 1. Elena was still sitting there. She hadn't moved. Her face was pale, her makeup standing out in stark, unnatural contrast against her skin. She looked like a doll that had been dropped. Her mouth opened slightly as he neared, perhaps to scream, perhaps to beg, but no sound came out. She was watching her social capital evaporate in real time, calculating the damage, realizing that the check for the new wing would never clear, that the board would demand her resignation by morning. Lucas didn't stop. He didn't look at her with hate. He didn't look at her with love. He looked at her with the polite indifference one gives a stranger on a subway. He walked past her chair, the hem of his jacket brushing against the back of it. "Lucas," she whispered. It was a strangled sound, barely audible. He didn't break stride. He pushed through the heavy double doors at the back of the room. The moment they swung shut behind him, the silence of the ballroom was cut off, replaced by the ambient hum of the hotel lobby. The concierge at the desk looked up, smiling professionally. He had no idea what had just happened inside. "Leaving so soon, Mr. Vane? The gala is just beginning." "The show is over, Arthur," Lucas said. His voice was calm, steady. "Do me a favor. If my wife asks, tell her I took the service elevator." He walked past the coat check. He didn't have a ticket. He realized he had left his cashmere overcoat in the cloakroom, the one Elena had bought him for his birthday to ensure he matched her outfit. Let it stay there, he thought. He pushed through the revolving glass doors and stepped out onto Michigan Avenue. The rain had stopped, but the wind coming off the lake was fierce, biting through his tuxedo. It was freezing, and it felt incredible. It felt like oxygen. The limousine was still parked at the curb, the driver waiting, scrolling on his phone. Lucas walked past at the black stretch car, past the emblem of the life he was supposed to want. He walked to the corner and raised his hand. A yellow taxi, battered and salt-stained, pulled over. Lucas opened the door and slid onto the cracked vinyl seat. It smelled of stale coffee and pine air freshener, a sharp contrast to the Santal 33 and leather he had suffocated in for years. "Where to, pal?" the driver asked, eyeing the tuxedo in the rearview mirror. Lucas looked out the window. He saw the lights of the hotel fading as they pulled away. He saw the text message notification pop up on his phone. Elena, calling. He silenced it, then powered the phone off completely. "North," Lucas said, leaning his head back against the seat. "Just drive north." The pen scratched against the paper, a dry, final sound in the quiet conference room. It was a Mont Blanc, heavy and black, the only object on the mahogany table other than the stack of documents that dismantled 10 years of legal union. "That's the last of it," the attorney said, sliding the file across the table. "The settlement is finalized. The transfer of the deed for the penthouse is recorded. You're a free man, Lucas." Lucas Vane capped the pen. He looked at the signature, Lucas Vane, and felt a strange lightness in his chest, as if he had just set down a rucksack he had been carrying for miles. "Is she coming?" Lucas asked, glancing at the empty chair on the other side of the table. "No," the attorney replied, slipping the documents into his briefcase. "Her counsel advised against it. She hasn't been going out much lately." Lucas nodded. He didn't need to ask why. In the 3 months since the Vane Hope Gala, Chicago society had done what it did best. It had cannibalized its own. The video of the presentation hadn't just stayed in the room. It had leaked, as Lucas knew it would. Within 24 hours, the time-stamped texts and the audio of Elena calling her husband furniture had circulated through every boardroom and charity committee in the city. The fallout was a study in gravity. The Vane Foundation Board, terrified of the PR nightmare, had voted Elena out less than a week after the gala. The Vane Hope Initiative was rebranded. And Mark Henderson? He had vanished from her side the moment the scandal broke, issuing a public statement claiming he was unaware of the complexities of her marital status. A lie that saved his career, but destroyed what little was left of Elena's dignity. She had the penthouse, the jewelry, and the settlement money, but she had lost the only currency she truly cared about: her relevance. "Thank you, David," Lucas said, standing up. "Send the final bill to my new address." Lucas walked out of the skyscraper and into the biting chill of a February afternoon. He took the train west, away from the Gold Coast, away from the manicured streets and the doormen in livery. He got off at Wicker Park. His new apartment was a converted loft in an old textile factory. It had exposed brick walls, drafty windows, and pipes that rattled when the heat kicked on. It was imperfect. It was loud. It was exactly what he wanted. He climbed the 3 flights of stairs, unlocking the heavy steel door. The space was mostly empty. A drafting table sat by the window, covered in sketches for a small library he was designing pro bono. There was no white furniture. There were no coasters he had to worry about misplacing. He made a cup of coffee, instant, cheap, hot, and walked to the window. Outside, the sky was a heavy, bruised purple. Snow began to fall, fat flakes drifting down to cover the grime of the city in a clean, white sheet. He thought about Elena. He wondered if she was standing in the window of the penthouse, looking out at the frozen lake. For a moment, he felt a phantom pang of the love he used to have for her, the ghost of the woman he thought he had married. But it was distant now, like a memory from a childhood he had outgrown. He had burned down the house to get warm, and for the first time in years, he wasn't shivering. Lucas took a sip of coffee. He watched the snow cover the tracks of the train that had brought him here. The silence in the loft wasn't heavy. It wasn't waiting to be broken by an insult or a demand. It was just silence. A blank page. He turned away from the window, walked to his drafting table, and picked up a pencil. He had a new life to design,